today's news, we have Philippine Constitution, Philippine taxation, and agrarian policies. What is Philippine Constitution? The Philippine Constitution or Saligang Batas ng Pilipinas o Konstitusyon ng Pilipinas is the supreme law of the Republic of the Philippines, a written document that creates a government and describes how that government is to work and run. It lists the government's power and responsibilities. It also limits the exercise of power of every individual. It also describes the main institution of the states and defines the relationship of this institution. These institutions are the executive, legislative, and judiciary branches.
Ruling by decree during the early months of her tenure as a president installed via the People Power Revolution. President Corazon Aquino was granted three options: restore the 1935 Constitution, retain and make reforms to the 1973 Constitution, or pass a new Constitution. She decided to draft a new Constitution and issued Proclamation No. 3 on March 25, 1986, abrogating many of the provisions of the 1973 Constitution adopted during the Marcos regime, including the unicameral legislature, the Batangas Pambansa, the office of Prime Minister, and provisions which give the President legislative powers.
During the later part of more than 300 years of Spanish rule, nationalized sentiment began to grow among group of Indios, which was how the Spanish referred to the Filipinos, fueled in large measure by the writings of national hero Jose Rizal. Later, executed by the Spanish authorities and other illustrators, the Filipino intelligentsia, a revolution was launched against Spain, and the revolutionaries declared Philippine independence in Cavite on June 12, 1898. What became known as the Malolos Congress was convened on September 15, 1898, and the first Philippine Constitution, called the Malolos Constitution, was approved on January 20, 1899. Assuring what is called the First Philippine Republic.
What is Philippine taxation? Taxation is a term for when a taxing authority, usually a government, levies or imposes a financial obligation on its citizens or residents. Paying taxes to government or official has been a mainstay of civilizations since ancient times. The policy of taxation in the Philippines is governed chiefly by the Constitution of the Philippines and three Republic Acts. Constitution Article Number 6, Section 28 of the Constitution states that the rule of taxation shall be uniform and equitable, and that Congress shall evolve a progressive system of taxation.
It all started from the ancient Filipinos, where they paid their taxes to their dato or the chiefs for the protection they gave to them. Everyone is required to pay their taxes except for the dato, chieftain's household. Punishment for not paying taxes was also implemented on this period. In 1884, the tribute was abolished and was replaced by the cedula or cedula, a certificate identifying the taxpayer that needs to be carried all the time. If someone is not able to present their cedula to a Guardia Civil, they will be imprisoned for being indocumentado, which means that they lack valid document or legal personal identification necessary to prove their identity. It was followed by the 1987 Philippine Constitution, stating that it sets limitation on the exercise of the power to tax. The rule of taxation shall be uniform and equitable. Let's look back. Lately, the current President of the Philippines, President Rodrigo Duterte, implemented the Train Law or Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion, which was signed last January 1, 2018, which seeks to correct a number of deficiencies in the tax system to make it simpler, fairer, and more efficient, wherein the rich will have a bigger contribution and the poor will benefit more from the government's program and service. Recently, for 2020, the country's priority investment areas include all qualified manufacturing activities. It includes agro-processing, agriculture, fishery, and forestry, strategic services, healthcare and disaster risk reduction management services, mass housing, infrastructure, and logistics, including LGU, SSS, innovation drivers, inclusive business models, environment and climate change related projects, and energy.
The importance of tax. Governments impose changes on their citizens and business as a means of raising revenue, which is the use of to meet their budgetary demands. This includes financing government and public projects as well as making the business environment in the country conducive for economic growth. Importance of tax in society. Without tax, governments would be unable to meet the demands of their societies. Tax are crucial because government collect their money and use into the financial projects. Some of these projects include the health, education, and also the governance. Health. Without tax, government contributions to the health sector would be impossible. Tax to go to funding the health service such as social health care, medical research, and also the social security. Education. Education could be the one of the most deserving receipt of tax money. Governments put a lot of importance in development of human capital, and education is central in this development. Most from tax is channeled to funding, furnishing, and maintaining the public's education system. Governance. Governance is a crucial component in the smooth running of country affairs. Poor governments would have a far-reaching ramification of the entire country with a heavy toll on this economic growth. Good governance ensures that the money collected is utilized in a manner that benefits citizens of the country. This money also goes to pay the public servant, police officers, members of parliaments, the postal system, and others. Indeed, with a proper and functioning form of government, there will be no effective protection of public interest. Importance of tax business. For business to flourish in this country, there will be good infrastructures such as roads, telephones, electricity, and health. These infrastructures is developed by the government or through close involvement of the government. When government collect the money from tax, it flush this money into the development of these infrastructures and in turn to promote economic activity throughout the country. The concept of the taxation is also important to business because governments compound this money back into the economy in the form of loans or other funding forms. Tax help raise the standard of living in a country. The higher the standard of living, the stronger and the higher the level of the consumption most likely is. Business flourishes when there is a market of their product and service. With a higher standard of living, business would be assured of living domestic consumption as well. Tax is essential and every citizen is meant to reap benefit of their tax. This is why it's important that citizen vendor to pay the tax and understand that it is meant to be more than just a money grab from the government.
Taxes are integral part of an economy. As a productive member of society, it's our duty to do our part and contribute. For starters, not paying taxes is against the law. Whether you're working for a company or your own business, you are required to pay taxes. Failure to do so will have some serious consequences. So the tax evaders will have to pay fines of not less than 500 pesos, but not more than 10 million pesos if proven guilty, and imprisonment of not less than 6 years but not more than 10 years in cases where there is an attempt to evade or defeat tax. Taxes help the government fund their projects for economic development. It is also the lifeblood of outstanding government employees like teachers and other professional individuals. Contributing your share of the pie greatly helps in the development of the Philippines as a whole.
Agrarian policies or the agricultural policies. Agrarian comes from the word agriculture. This describes the laws, instruments, and measures related to the domestic farm sector and trade in agricultural products. Agricultural policies encompasses a wide range of issues, including providing sufficient food at reasonable prices for consumers, securing food safety, and improving environmental quality. Despite this diversity, policies measures applied in a country within a certain period of time can be brought together and expressed in a set of numbers, called agriculture support indicators, which are comparable across time and between countries. Agrarian reform can refer either narrowly to government-initiated or the government-backed redistribution of agriculture or the sea land reform, or broadly to an overall redirection of the agrarian system of the country, which often includes land reform measures, or in other words, these policies initiated by the government among farmers' beneficiary to elevate poverty and promoting new economic opportunities towards sustainable rural development. Agrarian history. This is a historical discipline that encompasses development from ancient time to the present. Spanish period during 1521 to 1896. The colonial government at this period introduces a pueblo agriculture, a system wherein native rural communities were organized into pueblo and each personalized native family is given a 4 to 5 hectares of land to cultivate. The pueblo agriculture practiced no share, proper cost, or landless class. So, before the colonial government introduced pueblo agriculture, Spanish introduced the concept of encomenda to the Philippines. Encomenda means a system of giving lands or ipinipangalaga ng monarch or hari ng Spanya sa mga Spanish conquerors na naging loyal sa kanila. As a matter of policies, encomenderos must defend their encomenda from external attack, maintain peace and order within, and support the missionaries. In return, they were given the rights to collect taxes. So, dito sila kumikita for their source of income sa mga taxes na ibinabayad natin galing sa mga pananim. Mo to, gamay nila ang mabilin sa Spanish government even though dili nila pamuy-ari ang lupa, but they have the rights to collect because they are the holder of the encomendera. American period during 1898 to 1935. Realizing that being landless was the main cause of social unrest and revolt at that time, the Americans sought to put an end to the miserable condition of the tenant-dealers and small farmers by passing several land policies to widen the base of small land holdings and distribute land ownership among the greater number of Filipino tenants and farmers. So there are some noteworthy regulations enacted during American period. First, the Philippine Bill of 1902. This regulation settled the selling on the hectares of private individuals, 4 to 16 hectares for corporations. So yun lang dapat kalakiari ng isang individual or the corporation. Second, the Land Registration Act of 1902. These regulations provide for a comprehensive registration of the land titles under the torrent system sa pagkakaroon ng title ng lupa. Third, the Public Land Act of 1903 introduced homestead in the Philippines. Last, the Tenancy Act of 1933 regulated the relationship between landowners and tenants of rice 50-50 sharings, rice and sugarcane lands. So yung tenant at yung owner ng lupa dapat may 50-50 shares. Commonwealth period during 1935 to 1942. The government, under the stewardship of President Quezon, realized that land reform programs should be implemented immediately. They saw the purchase of friar lands as a possible way to solve the problem of inequitable land ownership. They also saw the homestead program could be transformed into a massive resettlement program if properly implemented. Japanese period. During this occupation, the peasant and the workers organized the Hukbalahap or the Hukbong Bayan labang sa mga Hapon on March 29, 1942 as an anti-Japanese group. They took over vast tracts of lands and gave the land and harvest to the people.
Manuel L. Quezon, 1935-1944. President Quezon led down a social justice program focused on the purchase of large haciendas which were divided and sold to tenants. This administration was responsible in establishing the National Rice and Corn Corporation, or what they called NARICC, and assigning public defenders to the assist peasants in court battles for their rights to till the land. Manuel Rojas, 1946-1948. Republic Act Number 34 was enacted to establish a 70-30 sharing arrangement between tenant and landlord. The 70% of the harvest will go to the person who shouldered the expenses for planting, harvesting, and for the work animals. President Rojas negotiated for the purchase of 8,000 hectares of land in Batangas owned by the Ayala Zobel family. These were sold to landless farmers. Elpidio Quirino, 1948-1953. Through Executive Order Number 355, the Land Settlement Development Corporation, or what we call LASEDECO, was established to accelerate and expand the peasant resettlement program of the peasant government. However, due to limited post-war resources, the program was not successful. Ramon Magsaysay, 1953-1957. President Magsaysay realized the importance of pursuing a more honest-to-goodness land reform program. He convinced the elite-controlled Congress to pass several legislation to improve the land reform situation. Carlos P. Garcia, 1957-1961. There was no legislation passed in his term, but he continued to implement the land reform programs of President Magsaysay. Diosdado Macapagal, 1961-1965. President Diosdado Macapagal was considered the father of agrarian reform. It was during his term that the Agricultural Land Reform Code or RA Republic Act Number 3844 was enacted on August 8, 1963. This was considered to be the most comprehensive piece of agrarian reform legislation ever enacted in the country that time. Ferdinand A. Marcos, 1965-1986. Presidential Decree Number 27 became the heart of the Marcos reform. It provided for tenanted lands devoted to rice and corn to pass ownership to the tenants, and lowered the ceilings for land holdings to 7 hectares. The law stipulated that sure tenants who worked from a land holding of over 7 hectares could purchase the land they held, while sure tenants on land less than 7 hectares would become leaseholders.
Corazon C. Aquino, 1986-1992. Various sectors recognize agrarian reform as a worthwhile social investment in terms of the tenant-teller status. This improved particularly those within landowners' retained areas or land holding subject for coverage. Fidel V. Ramos, 1992-1998. The Ramos administration is recognized for bringing back support of key stakeholders of CARP by bridging certain policy gaps on land acquisition and distribution, land violation, and case resolution. It is also credited for enhancing internal operating systems and strengthening the capabilities of the DAR of bureaucracy. This administration is also credited for tapping more resources to help implement the program. CARP, Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Policy, Republic Act Number 6657. CARP is an act instituting a comprehensive agrarian reform program to promote social justice and industrialization, providing the mechanism for its implementation and for other purposes. GARP is the most comprehensive agrarian reform law because it covers all private and public lands unsuitable for agriculture, regardless of tenurial agreement and crops produced. The law also adopted various progressive provisions needed by small and marginal farmers to have equitable land. To rectify this pervasive land tenure inequality, the Congress passed the Agrarian Reform Law in 1988 and implemented the GARP to improve the lives of small farmers by offering them land tenure security and support service.
That was the news of the truth and accuracy from the News Republic team. We will be back for the more news updates. Stay tuned.